wind whispered through the tall skeletal trees that lined the quiet rural neighborhood where Hannah had just moved. The air carried the faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder that autumn was settling in. The houses were spaced far apart, each one a lonely sentinel in the encroaching darkness. Hannah had chosen this place for its peace, its distance from the chaos of the city. But now, as she stood on the creaking porch of her new home, she couldn't shake the feeling that the silence was too heavy, too watchful. The first few days were uneventful. Hannah spent her mornings unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and exploring the winding trails that snaked through the woods behind her house. She liked the solitude, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long, jagged shadows on the ground. But it was on one of these walks that she first noticed him. He was standing at the edge of the trail, partially hidden by the underbrush. At first, she thought he was just another neighbor, perhaps out for a stroll like her. But there was something about the way he stood, completely still, his eyes fixed on her, that made her skin prickle. She offered a polite smile and a small wave, but he didn't respond. He just stared, his face expressionless, until she quickened her pace and left the trail. The next day, he was there again. This time, he was closer, standing just off the path, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his dark jacket. Hannah's heart skipped a beat as she recognized him. She tried to convince herself it was a coincidence, that he was just another walker enjoying the woods. But when she passed him, she felt his eyes follow her, burning into her back. She didn't look back, but she could hear the faint crunch of leaves underfoot as he began to follow her. Days turned into weeks, and the man's presence became a constant, unsettling fixture in Hannah's life. He was always there, always watching. She'd see him outside her workplace, leaning against a lamppost, his gaze never wavering. He'd appear at the grocery store, standing at the end of the aisle, his eyes tracking her every move. Once, she even found him sitting in his car outside her house, the engine idling, his face illuminated by the faint glow of the dashboard lights. Hannah tried to rationalize his behavior. Maybe he was just lonely, socially awkward. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. There was a coldness in his eyes, a predatory stillness that made her stomach churn. She started locking her doors at night, checking the windows before she went to bed. She stopped taking walks in the woods, opting instead to stay indoors, where she felt or hoped she was safe. But safety was an illusion. One night, as Hannah was washing dishes, she heard a faint tapping at the window above the sink. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned, her hands trembling. The window was dark, the reflection of the kitchen lights obscuring whatever was outside. She told herself it was just a tree branch, the wind. But then the tapping came again, louder this time, more deliberate. She reached for the phone, her fingers fumbling with the buttons, but before she could dial, the tapping stopped. The silence was worse. She stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, her eyes fixed on the window. And then slowly a face emerged from the darkness. It was him. His eyes were wide, unblinking, his lips curled into a grotesque smile. He pressed his palm against the glass, his fingers splayed, and Hannah felt a scream rise in her throat. She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, and the sound seemed to snap her out of her paralysis. She ran to the front door, locking it, then checked every window, every possible entry point. But when she returned to the kitchen, he was gone. The next morning, she called the police. They took her statement, but without evidence, there was little they could do. They promised to patrol the area, but Hannah knew it wouldn't be enough. She could feel him closing in, his presence like a shadow she couldn't shake. Days passed, and the tension grew unbearable. Hannah stopped sleeping, her ears straining for any sound, any sign that he was near. She started carrying a knife in her purse, her fingers curling around the handle whenever she left the house. But no matter how careful she was, he was always one step ahead. One evening, as she was driving home from work, she noticed headlights in her rearview mirror. At first, she thought nothing of it, but as she turned onto the narrow, winding road that led to her house, the headlights stayed with her, never falling back, never getting closer. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she glanced in the mirror again. The car was dark, its windows tinted, but she could just make out the silhouette of the driver. It was him. Panic surged through her as she pressed down on the accelerator, the car lurching forward. The road was empty, the trees looming on either side like silent witnesses. She took a sharp turn, her tires screeching, but the car behind her matched her every move. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. The road narrowed, the trees closing in, and Hannah realized with a sinking feeling that she was driving deeper into the woods. She glanced at the fuel gauge. The needle was hovering just above empty. She couldn't keep this up much longer. Desperation clawed at her as she scanned the road ahead, looking for a way out. And then she saw it, a small, overgrown path branching off to the right. Without thinking, she swerved onto it, the car bouncing over the uneven ground. The path led to an abandoned cabin, its windows shattered, its roof sagging under the weight of years of neglect. Hannah slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop. She grabbed her purse, her fingers closing around the knife, and bolted from the car. The headlights behind her flicked off, plunging the clearing into darkness. She could hear the sound of a car door opening, then footsteps crunching on the gravel. She ran to the cabin, her breath coming in ragged gasps, and pushed open the door. The interior was dark, the air thick with the smell of mold and decay. She stumbled inside, her eyes darting around the room, looking for a place to hide. There was a staircase leading to a second floor, but the steps looked rotten, unstable. She didn't have a choice. She climbed the stairs, each step creaking under her weight, and found herself in a small, cramped room. There was a closet in the corner, its door hanging off its hinges. She squeezed inside, pulling the door shut behind her, and crouched down, her knees pressed to her chest. She could hear him downstairs, his footsteps slow and deliberate, as if he were savoring the hunt. The sound of his voice made her blood run cold. "Hannah," he called, his tone almost playful. "I know you're here." She clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob, her body trembling uncontrollably. She could hear him moving through the cabin, opening doors, overturning furniture. He was getting closer. "You can't hide from me," he said, his voice growing louder. "I've been watching you for so long, you belong to me now." The footsteps stopped outside the closet door. Hannah's heart felt like it was going to burst out of her chest. She tightened her grip on the knife, her knuckles white. The door creaked open, and she saw his face, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. She lunged at him, the knife slashing through the air. He stumbled back, a look of surprise on his face, and she took the opportunity to bolt past him, down the stairs and out the door. She didn't look back, didn't stop to see if he was following her. She just ran, her legs pumping, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The woods were a blur of shadows and moonlight as she sprinted through the trees, branches clawing at her face and arms. She could hear him behind her, his footsteps pounding against the ground, his breath ragged and uneven. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. And then through the trees, she saw it. A light. A house. She ran toward it, her legs burning, her vision blurring with tears. She pounded on the door, screaming for help, and a moment later, it opened. An elderly woman stood there, her face pale with shock. "Please," Hannah gasped, her voice breaking. "He's after me. Please help." The woman pulled her inside, locking the door behind her, and called the police. Hannah collapsed onto the floor, her body shaking uncontrollably as the sound of sirens filled the air. The police found him in the woods, not far from the cabin. He was arrested, charged with stalking and attempted kidnapping. But even as they led him away in handcuffs, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching her, his eyes burning into her soul. She moved out of the neighborhood soon after, leaving behind the house, the woods, and the memories of that night. But no matter how far she ran, she could never escape the feeling of his presence, the knowledge that he was still out there, waiting. And she knew, deep down, that he would never stop. If you enjoyed this bone-chilling tale of terror, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more stories that will haunt your dreams. And remember, when the wind whispers through the trees and the silence feels too heavy, it's not just your imagination. Someone or something might be closer than you think. Lock your doors, check your windows, and never let your guard down. Until next time, stay safe if you can.